Guys, I have a really, really good interview set up for today. Fraser Bayley, he's the concierge nutritionist to the top 1%. And he's going to try and help you crack your biological code and become the superhuman 2.0 version of yourself. But
Yep.
just because you're not in the 1% now, doesn't mean you can't take his advice, start pulling those proper levers, optimize your diet, training, mindset, and your overall health while you're kind of on that journey to get there. But Fraser, getting to know you really over the last year, I kind of know you have like an awesome backstory on where you came from, especially to where you are now. So
Yeah.
for those of you being introduced to you for the first time, who is Fraser Bayley? And tell us a little bit about your journey.
Dude, I love this. Thank you for having me on the show. And guys, I'm going to make sure that we add a ton of value to anyone listening. So first of all, I wanted to kind of say that, when you're talking about the top 1%, more than anything, man, it's a mindset. Like it's not even necessarily the top 1% financially. It's like that 1% of individuals who want to actualize their potential. They want to, and so it doesn't matter where you're at, you can have that belief in you like today. So you could be a 1%er if you have the right mindset. And so, who, in terms of who is Fraser Bayley? So, man, trying to compress this down a little bit to some degree, but I grew up in New Zealand. I'm from New Zealand, American citizen now, been living in the US for 10 years. And in my early teens and into my early 20s, through that decade, I was diagnosed with a myriad of health complications, a myriad of health problems. And basically what happened was I got to a place in my life where, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, severe social anxiety, ADHD. I was the kid going to school, getting the C's and the D's for achievement. But I was doing like B's and A's for effort. So I was, at the time, before I completely gave up, I was trying, but it was not converting into real world results. And so that was very disheartening. I grew up in a family that was in many ways disjointed. My parents separated when I was about 5 or 6 years old. And that definitely had its challenges on me, I think. My family came from a place of different mental health problems. I'm not going to obviously dive into everyone else's details. That's their private stuff. But
Yeah.
Mental health challenges and addictions tend to run in my family. And so growing up in my teens, and this is, what I'll tell your audience is now ADHD and challenges like this are way more prevalent. You hear every second kid's got ADD, ADHD. Back then, because I'm going to be 39 this year. So back then, this is, 20, 25, almost 30 years ago. This was not as common. And there was no internet. So it wasn't like I could just go online and find resources to learn about, okay, how do I improve these things? Unless I knew someone who'd walked through these challenges, I had no idea. Like my parents had no idea that nutrition and lifestyle played a role in mental health and mental acuity and all these things. And I had no idea either. And through my teens, having these ailments, I was heavily medicated. I was medicated for all of those different things on benzodiazepines, which are a very addictive, anti-anxiety drug, Ritalin and lithium carbonate for bipolar disorder. And dude, I mean, like when I tell you, like my diet was terrible, my lifestyle, like I was just this young kid eating processed foods. I had terrible acne. That was one of the hardest things I remember in my teens, man. The acne was the hardest part because, when you're a teenager, you're so self-conscious about the way you look. And then when you have all these freaking things going, like, you look like a pizza face, man. It's like, dude, it's so brutal. And it was such a challenging time in my life. And I left school young. I was at the point where I was like, okay, I'm getting C's and D's for achievement. I'm clearly not very intelligent. This is a story I told myself. I'm clearly not very, very intelligent. I might as well just go get a job and start making some money. And at the time, I was working in a butchery part-time after school. And basically, I was like, well, I'm just going to go do that. There was no conscious decision of like, what do I want to do in my life? I just kind of fell into that because I was already doing that part-time after school anyway. Mm-hmm. And I went there to work full-time and talk about an industry that is quite toxic. A lot of the people that work in that type of industry tend to be alcoholics, addicted to drugs, they have anger management issues. It's just the type of person that industry either attracts or creates or both. And so talk about like pouring jet fuel on a fire, right? I already had mental health problems, I already had challenges, and then I'm going into an industry and an environment that just 10x's that. And so that was really challenging, because then I started to just heavily drink, abuse my prescription medications, all kinds of stuff. Long story short, I got to the point where I would wake up every morning and I would literally cry. I would wake up, I'd light a cigarette, and I'd start crying, thinking to myself, oh my God, another day at work. Like I couldn't even fathom going to do this thing for another year. I thought to myself, if I have to do this job for another year, I will literally commit suicide. Like literally. That was how bad it got. And I'd already had some attempts, and just like I'd had already these challenges. And I remember the day that I quit, and I thought to myself, this is it. I have to start a new life. And it wasn't like just one aha moment. Some people have these stories where they had this like one instance in their life where it was that one thing that completely changed the trajectory of their life. For me, it wasn't quite like that. It was like a series of aha moments, one aha moment followed by another one, like a stepping stones, basically. And I went back, I left the butchery. I went back to study law and psychology at college. And at the time I was hopeful. I was hopeful that I'd been through enough life experience that I could, figure this stuff out. And in hindsight, I look back and I realized that I wanted to do those degrees just to kind of, for the accolades. I thought, okay, law and psychology, that looks cool. I wanted to do it for the accolades. I wanted to do it to like appease my family. I wasn't doing it for me. And I even struggled with that. And so talk about like multiple defeats, like you try high school, you failed that. You go to the butcher, you fail at that. You go back to college, you fail at that. And it's like just one failure after another, after another. And it got to the point where I had no direction in my life. And my psychiatrist said to me, why don't you go and see this psychotherapist called Frank Hayes? And at the time I'd never had therapy, didn't really know, what it was about, but I was like, whatever, if this is going to have any chance of helping me, whatever. Mm-hmm. And so I went to see this psychotherapist, which is like a psychologist basically. And he changed my life. He changed the trajectory of my life. I ended up seeing him for 14 years on a weekly basis, obviously missing the odd week here and there, but pretty much consistent for 14 years straight. And he changed the way I see the world. And he even kind of introduced me to fitness. He said, you have all this pent up tension. I can feel it kind of emanating from you. Why don't you go to the gym and try working out? And at the time, I'd never really worked out before. I had never really thought about it as like a stress reliever. I thought people just worked out to look jacked. I didn't know that it could actually affect your temperament, your moods, your psychology. And I was like, well,
everything.
Absolutely everything. And so I was like, well, whatever, I'll give it a shot. He's been right about some other things. I'll try this too. And I went there, and that's really what paved the way to where I am today. So I started training, basically got addicted to that, transitioned out of like going out at night to parties and drinking and all the crazy stuff in the evenings, because a lot of the crowd that I would enjoy working out with would go first thing in the morning. And so that became like my social circle. And a lot of these guys were about 10, 15 years older than me as well. So not only was I now in an environment where like drinking and partying and stuff wasn't really conducive, but I was going to the gym in the morning, and the guys had families, they had children, and I was like the young guy in the group. And so, and I didn't consciously engineer that. It just happened that way. But I actually think, looking back, that's really what gave me the level of maturity and a level of insight and wisdom that propelled me forward. And that's when I realized, hey, this is something I really enjoy. Why don't I go at least try and study this and make something of this? And so that's when I went back again to college again to study nutrition and human structure and function, which is kind of like physiology, talking about systems in the body and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And this time I passed. This was the first time in my life that I'd actually overcome and like hit a home run on anything. And that's really paved the way to where I am today. So sort of fast tracking, after being on those medications for about 10 years, I ended up weaning off all of those things. So I haven't been on any medications now for about 12 years. I got away from drinking alcohol. I started training really consistently, shaped my body, reinvented myself in many ways. I did what I call back now going into monk mode, where I just stopped going out and partying and doing these things. And I just watched like National Geographic documentaries and Discovery Channel, like on repeat. I just watch all these things and just like a sponge. And I found that as I started becoming more conscious about my diet, as I started to train more consistently, removing the alcohol and upgrading my lifestyle, I noticed that like my mood and my temperament and my psychology started to shift too. And that's when I started to wean away from the medications, because I thought to myself, what if a lot of these ailments or these challenges that I've been through were a snapshot in time based on everything that I was doing in my life? So all the processed foods, all the poor lifestyle choices were causing a level of inflammation in my body, in my brain, through my system that was resulting in those diagnoses. What if that's something that's transient? What if it's not as fixed as people think? And that's when I really made this shift. And then meeting my wife, Lauren, and coming over to the US, everything just kind of accelerated, where I became more and more fascinated with endocrinology and neurobiology and psychology and how all these systems in the body come together. Because that's one of the things I realized in typical fitness or in typical fat loss or whatever, it's very compartmentalized. You can have a very good visual transformation, but you can feel terrible like internally and have terrible energy and all those types of things. And so I started to realize, okay, how do you reverse engineer human biology? And that's what kind of led me down the path of digging into blood work and using blood work and actual objective data to then reverse engineer backwards, like your diet, your supplementation, your lifestyle modifications based on your numbers, your data, your information. And that unlocked everything. And, to the point now where, I mean, some of the guys that I've worked with, like our mentors, Mark Evans, Tim Bratz, musician Chris Daltrey. I've done stuff with him for a number of years now. And so he was, one of these American Idol stars that I followed when I was back in New Zealand. Yeah. And so here I am thinking, watching this guy, and this is American Idol, like season 2 or 3. And I'm thinking, man, like these guys are amazing. Like his voice is amazing. Like he inspired me. And I was a butcher, man, back in New Zealand. And so I think to myself, what are the odds of me being a butcher back in New Zealand, watching a guy like him on American Idol kick butt? And now he's like one of my best friends and a student, and I hang out with him all the time. I just like that type of possibility. And so long story short, I've really just come to this place where, the work that I do isn't just about a visual transformation. It's not just about having abs or looking jacked. It's about how can you optimize internally, enhance longevity, enhance how you think and operate. And then as a byproduct, enhance your aesthetics. So it's come full circle. And, I share my story and I share that stuff to try and create this perspective of, if someone like myself, where I was at, can change, I think most people can. They just have to have that belief that change is possible first. If you don't have that belief that change is possible, then you're going to be stuck. But if you think to yourself, okay, there's proof out there that other people have done this before me. Yeah. Like, why can't I do it too? That's all you need to take that first action step to transform your life. So that's kind of like the backstory in a sense.
No, that's awesome. And I actually think it's great, because here's the thing. If someone were to go on your social media right now, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, whatever, they see this like huge guy deadlifting 600 plus pounds, like benching huge amounts as well. And they probably like, I can't relate to that at all. Like, yeah, it's cool to see it, but yeah, how can I aspire to be like something that I'm not even capable of doing half of that for a lot of people out there, right? So yeah, it's cool to see where you came from to where you transitioned to, because even someone like you, right? Yeah. You didn't even start working out until at some point, just like Gary Vee says, everybody starts with 0 followers. Yeah. So I think the one interesting thing, and I'm sure you've realized it before, but it sounds like that psychiatrist who you spent 10 to 15 years with really was A, your first mentor, but B, some of the suggestions that he made just completely altered and changed the path of your life because he suggested working out.
Yeah.
Look at you
Yeah.
now. He suggested, nutrition and psychology. And what did you do? You're
Yeah.
nutritionist at the top 1%. Like all those suggestions that he made, like could have been your introduction to mentorship. And look at the people that you kind of get into networking groups with. Like I'm in a DM alliance with you, but Mark Evans, for example, like seems like that really changed the trajectory of your life.
Yeah. And it's funny because at the time I didn't realize it. Very often, like you don't realize, the opportunities necessarily that you're being presented with till you look back. And now I see in sort of full bloom, it makes me realize, I don't know if you've heard of that concept before called the butterfly effect,
Mhm.
where, a little butterfly, it's this theory, right? And it is a beautiful thing to contemplate, where this little butterfly flaps its wings on one side of the world, and those little wind bursts create wind currents that turn into like larger wind currents. And then on the other side of the world, after it's sort of accumulated, it creates like a storm. And so I think to myself, from that place of, synchronicity and just like having all of these dominoes fall into place. And it really has made me understand the power of nutrition, the power of, healing. And, we can even talk about that with your audience, if you had injuries, or even, psychological injuries or different things, your body has this really potent innate ability to heal, but you just have to know how to fuel it the right way. You have to know what tools are at your disposal to initiate that. And a lot of people, they don't understand that. They will, especially I think in a lot of the circles that we're in, a lot of the guys and people in general can prioritize investing and net worth and put their portfolio and their and all these things, but they don't understand how them being out of shape and overweight and having brain fog and all these things is just such a shortcoming. Like they could be so much better. Like some people will say, well, look at guys like Elon Musk, he's not in exactly great shape and look how successful he is. And my perspective is, imagine how much more effective someone could be if they were in shape as well. So like, take someone like that and then he really works on his health too. He would probably be even better than he is.
Which is just wild to even think.
Yeah, and it's
that
the
he
same.
could be better.
Yeah, and it's the same. It's the same with with anyone. And so no matter where you're at, what level of success you've had, I like to think there's untapped potential in anyone. And I, even to this day, having done this for years and years now, I still see myself actualizing potential. I still see myself leveling up and achieving new things that before I didn't. And I think to myself, one of my biggest drivers now as a father, I have a 4-year-old daughter called Zia, and one of my biggest drivers now as a father is, I think to myself, I don't want to be responsible or be a burden to her when she's older because of my poor health choices. Like when she's an adult, I don't want her to have to look after me and pay for stuff for me and basically nurse me because I made poor health decisions when I was younger. Obviously, I know there's a certain point where I'm sure, as an elderly person, you'll need to be looked after, but I want to try and prolong that and mitigate that as much as I can. I don't want to be that burden on my family because I chose to not look after myself. And I say that to guys. I'm like, look, you need to, like, obviously do this for you, do this for your own quality of life. If you're a business owner, an entrepreneur, do this because, it makes your brand look better when you look better. But beyond that, do this because you don't want to be a liability to your family. That's a huge driver, I think, for me at least. And it's like a wake-up call for a lot of people. So yeah, man, I mean, it's a journey. And like, in terms of this discussion, we can talk about all kinds of stuff, in terms of accelerating healing, recovery. We can talk about ROIs as an entrepreneur, like anything that you feel is going to add value.
You know what? Let's start right there, because that's who you work with every day. Is a lot of top people, individuals around the country, especially in the entrepreneur space. So like, say as an entrepreneur, like why is your health the most important return on investment or ROI that you can have? Not only personally, but also in your business.
Yeah. I mean, we'll think about this. If you have a business and you're making money, or whatever you're doing, if you are not happy, if you're miserable and your mood is low and you feel exhausted and you're out of breath and you feel self-conscious and you're not confident with how you look and you're hiding from pictures because of how you look and you're not shooting videos and producing content because of how you look, that's a huge liability. That's a huge issue. And the sooner you face up to that and own that and say, I've got to do something about this, it will unlock levels in your life. And think about this, you're only as, in many ways, as an entrepreneur, you're only as effective as like your ability to think. And so if you are constrained, like if your energy levels are up and down through the day and you're exhausted and you're burned out, your ability to produce and do calls and do follow-up and interact with people is going to have a lot of limitations. And so the more limitations you have on yourself around those variables, the more of a restriction it's going to create on your ability to grow and expand. And I've seen time and time again, Anthony, how when my students who are already in business start to optimize their health too, like everything improves. I've seen it where their marriage improves because their temperament and their mood balances. A huge part of what I focus on is how can you use supplementation and nutrition to get good energy and stabilize your state through the day. And so, I mean, you know firsthand, like if you've had an injury or something and it's taking a long time to heal and you're in pain, you're not going to be a very pleasant person to be around sometimes.
No.
And that's going to be a huge issue. Like if you're a father or if you have a wife or a husband or whatever, it's going to be a huge issue in terms of the quality of life for them. So from a perspective of you being your best ROI and you prioritizing your health as a conduit to think more productively, to see opportunities more clearly, to have a more bandwidth, more emotional, more mental bandwidth with your kids, with your spouse. I mean, I'll tell you this, after a long day of working with a lot of pressure, if you're unhealthy, you're not going to have any bandwidth for your family. And you're going to be absent. And that's what most people are like. They're there, but they're absent. And that is a huge detriment. Like you can't really put a monetary value on that, but that's massive. And so from my perspective, if you can optimize someone's well-being, they can reclaim so much of that bandwidth, and that just enhances the quality of their life. It causes a ripple effect that enhances the quality of their spouse's life, their kids' life, their coworkers, their employees, everything. And then the last thing, and this is a big one for a number of people, is that I had a conversation with a guy once, and he was about 50 pounds overweight. And he even admitted to me, he said, look, I don't do videos. I'm not in pictures because I'm super self-conscious of how I look. And so not only is he not getting pictures with his family as memories with his kids, with his wife, like he's not collecting memories, like they're in pictures, he's taking the pictures, he's not in them. And so he's like a ghost. And beyond that, he knows that there's so much content he could create and talk about, but he's so self-conscious, he can't get himself to get in front of the camera. And so, and he knows that's a huge issue. So straight out of the gate, beyond just looking good, like it can stunt your ability to just do stuff. I always tell people, like, get to a place where you can optimize your health so much that you're just ready. You're ready to go. Like if someone called you up tomorrow and said, hey, you got this big television interview, like you're not going to panic at all. You're not going to be like, oh my God, I'm 10 pounds overweight. What do I do? Like I've got a week to go. Like you're going to be ready, and you're going to be like, I'm dialed in. I'm focused on the task at hand. Like you're going to be going to that with confidence, and people will feel that. So I think from a place of, framing it from that perspective, do you want to talk about some tactics? Do you want to talk about some nuggets or some things that people could actually do if they're in that
for
position?
sure. But I also think that it's important, like just because I asked the question about like entrepreneurs and the ROI that they can get, like everything that you just talked about, I feel is extremely important for anybody and everybody. Like it doesn't
100%.
matter if you're an entrepreneur or not. Like if you're working out, staying active, feeling better, feeling confident, looking your best, like tell me that's not going to improve your life, regardless if you're getting an entry-level job, unemployed, or you are a top level entrepreneur. You're like all
Yeah.
aspects of your life are going to improve because of you being active. And like to
Yeah.
me, it's like I've always been active. I was always playing some type of sport, always involved in the gym somewhat, but it wasn't really, I'd say, until a year and a half ago where I really started trying to like optimize everything in terms of
Yeah.
the routine I was doing. Like,
Hmm.
before I wouldn't really care about diet, but actually like dieting properly, supplementing properly, like not drinking barely at all.
Yeah.
And I view exercise almost like a building block to
Hmm.
business. Because if you're working out and you're building all of those good habits, you're doing all the reps, all the sets,
Hmm.
you're writing out a workout and you're not stopping until you do everything on the agenda for that day.
Yeah.
It's no quitting, no getting tired, no, I don't feel like it anymore. Like if you can start building that consistency and dedication in the gym, how you do one thing is how you do everything. So it's going to
Yeah.
translate to better business and better everything.
I definitely noticed that the consistency and the ability to exert discipline with health and fitness for me personally transferred over to those other areas. You start to train your ability. You
You're
train
training
yourself.
your mind just like you're training your body. Like you have to.
Yeah. And you reframe what pain and discomfort looks like. So, there's obviously a good pain and a bad pain, like the sharp stabbing pain, that's not good pain. But that sort of, low grade burn where it just feels like the lactic acid's building up and it's
Yeah.
like, and you're struggling. A lot of people will feel that and they're like, oh, this feels uncomfortable, I'm going to stop. And I tell people that's the sweet spot. Like that's the zone that you want to get to and sit in that for as long as you can. And I found that when I was able to reframe that as the target, it helps me reframe a lot of things. It helps me recognize that very often that video that I don't want to shoot, that post that I don't want to make, that call that I don't want to do, like that's literally the thing I should be doing.
Yeah.
It's
And if
like a
you're
compass pointing.
dedicated to the gym and like me, like I do quarter-mile lunges every single day. Doesn't
Yep.
matter if I want to, if I
Yep.
feel like it, if I'm sore, if I'm feeling like amped up, ready to go, if it's raining, if it's sunny, like I do it unless I have an injury. If I have an
Yep.
injury, I'm not going to push it to make it worse, right?
Yep.
But usually I've gone on 150-day streaks of not missing a day.
Yeah.
And then,
Yep.
something comes up, you miss something here and there. Nothing's ever perfect.
Yeah.
But like, how sore do you think you get that first 7 to 10 days of starting it?
Yeah.
You don't want to do it the next day, but if
And
you like, you build
it's
that dedication, the days you don't feel like marketing, the days you don't feel like shooting content, the days you don't feel like making phone calls, like
yeah.
you're gonna be like, well, I did it when a difficult exercise yesterday, so I might as well just do this too. Like it
It's
carries over.
it's that concept called the hormetic effect, where the hormetic effect basically talks about a small exposure to stress creates long-term resiliency. And so we can see this when you are doing sauna or when you're doing cold plunge. 3 minutes of cold plunge is actually creates metabolic resiliency. If you were to sit in the cold plunge for 3 hours, you die. So same with the sauna. If you were to sit in the sauna all day, you die. But 20 minutes creates metabolic resiliency. So that short burst of stress actually causes downstream strength. And so that's what I talk about, and you can apply that to anything. So you can apply that with your nutrition, with your immune system, with your psychology. Your body needs exposure to stress mechanisms in a productive way. And then you need to counteract that with the right recovery protocols. So, for instance, like one of the things
Which is
that
great. I'm glad you're going to recovery because I want to ask you about a recovery question. So go ahead and
yeah,
finish
and this
that, and then I'll
and this,
follow up with it.
yeah, and this is very important, I think, for for your audience who might have heard of 70 Andy Frisella's 75 hard, and I know that you've done that before as
Yeah.
well. And so that program is, I think it's amazing. I think the structure of it gets people accountable, it gets people dialed in. But what most people make the mistake of doing is they don't have a proper plan going into it. And so they have all this stress, they have all this stimulus in the form of, double training sessions. But they don't have a lot of recovery protocols in place to then recover from that stress. And so if you keep doing that long-term, your body just breaks down. Think about this. You have like a stress bucket. And so that bucket is basically how much accumulative stress you can handle before you start to go downhill. And that stress isn't just in the form of like physical stress from training. It can be, nutritional stress. Like if you were to eat a lot of processed junk foods and things, that's going to cause inflammation and some degree of like dietary stress on your system. Emotional stress, like sleep hygiene. If your sleep's not good, that in and of itself is going to be a stress factor. And so most people, if they're consuming alcohol, they're not sleeping very well, they're eating processed foods, and then they're trying to train. So this stress bucket is just like overflowing and they're not recovering. And so what's happening is the hormones start to tank, you start to get injuries, your brain chemicals start to deoptimize, you age faster, and then you just feel like trash. And that's what most people do. And then they're like, oh, I just feel terrible. I was working out, but I felt terrible. And it's like, well, you felt terrible because your accumulative stress bucket was just overflowing because you did not have enough nutritional protocols in place to like start recovering. Your diet didn't have enough antioxidants, anti-inflammatory foods, phytonutrients. And beyond that, it's even recovery protocols like sun exposure is one, and then mobility work. So you've got like different things like, various stretching, therapeutic yoga, breathing, meditation. Those types of things are the yin and yang, the recovery protocols. And so I found, especially as I've aged, I've had to become more and more conscious of recovery protocols. When you're 20 years old, you can just train and eat pizza and drink beer and you'll get some results. Now, it's not to say you'll feel great, but you'll get some visual result. Now, if you try and do that when you're 40, you're just going to have a dad bod and you're going to look fat and you're going to feel terrible, because as you age, like you do become more sensitive. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but you are more sensitive. So I do think in terms of recovery, if I had to give people suggestions right out of the gate, obviously I think psychological recovery, like some type of meditation practice where you're just like controlling your breathing and gaining governance over your nervous system. Like your breathing is one of those mechanisms where it's either automatic or conscious. That's the beautiful thing about it, is that you don't have to think about breathing. But that's also the bad thing about it, because most people just like shallow mouth breathe. And so because of that, they're constantly stimulating their sympathetic nervous system. And so they're constantly in this sort of stress response state. Beyond that, that's why for me, after I train, I have this sort of hierarchy of things that I put into my post-workout fuel. I love to do blueberries and blackberries and all these things that are high in antioxidants, because after you've just trained, you've caused a whole bunch of what's called oxidative stress. And that's kind of like, your body's broken down, the muscle building process has to start to begin. So by, consuming protein and amino acids, that helps with the muscle building process. But you also need foods and things that help with inflammation. So, foods that are high in antioxidants, blueberries, blackberries, things like that. My wife does a lot of juicing. And so she'll juice things like, celery and spinach and stuff like that, but then she'll put turmeric and ginger in there as well. And so I'll have these little juice shots that I do. And so obviously ginger and turmeric are very anti-inflammatory.
I do one every day.
And so, and then that again, recovery protocols, so all of these things. And I tell people, as much as you can, try to get these things from whole foods. A lot of people will just take a bunch of supplements and that they hope that the supplements will fix the problem. And I'll tell you this, if supplements were the solution, everyone would be in shape, because the supplement industry is this massive industry. Everyone buys pills. If that was the only thing that was involved in being in amazing shape, everyone would be in shape. The reason why they're not is because it's one part of a more complex equation. And I tell people, if you can get your antioxidants, your anti-inflammatory compounds, your phytonutrients from whole foods as much as you can, and then supplement with various things when needed, you're gonna be ahead of most people already.
I love it. I try to do the same thing. I actually think you hit some good topics there, because strain on your body as well as the recovery part. That's actually,
Yeah.
you partly encouraged me as well as some other factors with getting the Whoop 4.0 band.
Mm-hmm.
I was before, I didn't even use the Apple Watch, and now I use the Apple Watch for a while trying to train activity, but it only measures certain things. It's not
Yeah.
very comprehensive. So with the Whoop, like, I'm kind of excited to now be able to start tracking that strain that you're putting on the body, measure recovery, making sure that you're kind of good to go the next day, all of that. Otherwise, you're kind of flying blind. You're
Yeah.
playing the guessing game, not only with your diet, but the level of stress that your body can handle. So it's going to be interesting to see how it
Yeah.
measured out, how it kind of coaches me. And maybe that's a suggestion that other people could do. I know,
Yeah.
my girlfriend Megan uses the Aura ring, but
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to be wearing a ring on my hands. I wanted to go with the Whoop band.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I started paying attention to on top of that was sleep. And I think you're the one that really started bringing sleep to my attention by some of the calls that you've done in the
Mm-hmm.
DM Alliance. And when I started tracking it, I still don't think the Apple Watch has been very accurate for me,
No.
but it's at least gotten me to the point where, like, I recognize at a bare minimum how my heart rate was
Mm-hmm.
reacting while I sleep. Like if I had a
Yeah.
drink or two drinks that day or that night, let's say a glass or two of wine with dinner, my heart rate would go from 50 to 55 while I'm sleeping on, like, as a low
Yeah.
average, all the way. I couldn't drop below 75 beats a minute.
That's
And it's like,
that's
man, if
very
my
common.
body's like
Yeah.
struggling to process the alcohol and my heart rate can't drop that low, like my quality of sleep went to absolute crap. So like
Yep.
for you, why is sleep like so important with that recovery process, and what kind of tips
Yeah.
do you have to fall like into that deep sleep cycle?
Yeah.
Specifically,
Yeah.
that's where I'm struggling. So if I'm struggling with it, I'm sure other people are too. So
Yeah.
how do you do better deep sleep?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And this relates to even recovery with injuries and stuff. So your ability to recover in general, whether it be recovering from an injury, some type of like physically traumatic event, recovering from a workout, recovering from a hard day of working, sleep is like the biological reset. I almost liken it like, you're hitting the reset button on your system. And I mean, they literally in warfare use sleep deprivation as a torture technique. Your mental health will just go down the toilet as soon as you're sleep deprived, and you won't even realize it half the time. Like if you have, for me, for instance, a little interesting story for you. My daughter, when she was from the age of when she was first born through to about 2 years old, she would wake up, and when I say this, I'm not exaggerating, anywhere from 5 to 15 times per night for like 2 years straight. And it was
I still
brutal.
wake up like 5 times every single night. I don't
Yeah.
ever sleep through the whole night. So I was kind
Yeah.
of selfishly asking your opinion too,
Yeah.
'cause
Yeah.
I'd
And
like to
so
know.
what, and this is very common too, by the way. And so what I would say, if I had to riff with you right now, some of the key things that you want to be conscious of with sleep. Obviously, the first thing is get some type of like tracking device so you can see what's working and see what's not. Like you got the Whoop, your girlfriend has the Oura ring. The good thing about that is it's then objective. You're not just guessing and being like, oh, well, I think I slept well, but did I sleep well? Like you actually have information on how much REM sleep did you get? How much deep sleep did you get? How much light sleep did you get? So a couple of things. The first thing is nutritional sort of timing. So nutrient timing, meaning if you eat too close to bed, your core temperature is going to be elevated to some degree and your digestion is going to be working, and that's going to keep you from more deep and REM sleep cycles. So what I try and tell people is, as best as you can, have your last calories about 3 hours before you sleep. Like some people will be eating right till bedtime. That's one of the worst things you can do for longevity and sleep optimization. So
Okay.
I'll have dinner. I mean, I go to bed pretty early. I go to bed like 8:30. I get up really early. I go to bed early. It's just the way that I function. But I'll have dinner at about 5 p.m., like 5 or 5:30. I have dinner early. I get my digestion's done. By the time I go to bed, I'm not feeling like full. Because the other thing is that if you eat too close to bed, you can even give yourself reflux. And so that in and of itself can be an issue for people. So the first thing is push your meals back some, like further down earlier in the day. The other thing is that if you are waking up to use the bathroom quite a lot, and you're drinking a lot of fluids through the day, what I tell people is try to front load your hydration in the morning up till midday and then taper away for the rest of the day. That was one of the biggest challenges I had, because I drink a lot of fluids. I'm just, I'm very active. And so I'm drinking a lot, but the downside to that is, man, I would be waking up 3-4 times to go to the bathroom.
Yeah,
and so it was really frustrating, man. It was really frustrating. And so what I did was I super hydrate in the morning. Like I drink a lot before I train. I drink a lot while I'm training. And then I drink quite a lot after I train in the morning. But then from about lunchtime onwards, I'll still drink. Like I'm not dehydrating myself, but I don't chug down endless amounts of fluids. So by the time bedtime comes around, most of it's out of my system. And then I'll only get up like once. And then I'll super hydrate in the morning again. So that's the second thing. The other things that I think, obviously what you touched on, alcohol, is I've seen the data over and over and over again, where a guy won't have drinks for 30 days. Their heart rate might be like 40, 50 beats per minute. They have 2 glasses of wine and it's like 70 or 80 beats per minute. That's crazy. Like, so what's happening is your body's in like a hyper stressed state. Think about this. When your heart's beating faster like that, you're wearing out your cardiovascular system faster. It's like you putting more miles on your engine of your vehicle. Like if you just start driving around and you're clocking up 100,000, 200,000, 500,000 miles, eventually the engine's going to need to be replaced. And so that's what's happening when your heart is beating at 70, 80, 90 beats per minute, like chronically. It's not a bad thing to get your heart rate high during exercise. That's that hormetic stress factor I was talking about at the start. But when it's chronically elevated, that's when you wear it out like a vehicle clocking up 500,000 miles. So definitely finding non-alcoholic wines and beers, drinking soda waters, eliminating alcohol as much as you can will only work wonders for your longevity, your mental health, all of those things.
Interesting.
Outside of that, I tell people to try to get your room cold. It's funny because guys seem to have no issue with this. The women hate the suggestion. Like ladies hate the cold. Guys are like, oh, I love the cold. So like I'll turn the thermostat down. I suggest anywhere between like 68 and 69 degrees. Even 70 could be okay potentially, but you want it colder than warm. If it's warm, it's going to keep your body temperature elevated, and that's going to definitely impact REM and deep sleep cycles. So as much as you can, or alternatively, if you don't want to make the air temperature colder, you can actually get these things now like sleep number beds, or like these chili pads, where it's like a pad that goes under the bed. You can put it on your side. It runs like cold water underneath. And so your side's cold, her side's normal. And so that way,
steal that tip.
I'm telling you now, like a chili pad, like we don't have one right now because we're traveling in our RV, but when our house is built, I'm getting one because I know that will be useful. Another thing can be like sauna, and then cold in the evening before bed. So if you have a sauna in your house or you have access to that, and you can get some type of cold exposure before bed, that really helps. I've seen it in the data and myself. I know that works for me, and I've seen it work for other people. Another thing is blue light exposure. So on most of the phones now have the benefit of having those blue light filters on them. You see guys wearing like the orange glasses and stuff. Whether you want to wear orange glasses or you want to put blue light filters on as many devices as possible, try to have as little blue light exposure in the evening as you can. So like turn off your interior lights, use candlelit diffusers, use Himalayan salt lamps to create light, put the blue light blocking filters on your phone, on your computer. And then that way you're not at least getting that blue light exposure, which is coming into your retinas and causing that melatonin suppression. So that's the other thing. In terms of like, in terms of supplementation, so I would say like in general, processed foods and processed sugars and just like that type of stuff, it's just going to disrupt sleep. It's just the way it is. It's inflammatory. It's just not that good, generally speaking. But if you were going to look at sort of some certain supplements or things like that, things like a good quality magnesium, glycine, L-theanine. Right now, at the time of this episode that we're doing, there is a product that I'm using and I don't know if I'll be using it long term, a year or two from now, but I enjoy it. And it's by this brand called Life Force. So Tony Robbins partnered with Peter Diamandis, I think, a couple of guys, to create this nutraceutical company. And it's called Life Force. And very, very good quality products. I have no affiliation to them yet, but they have a product called Life Force Rest. And it's a powder. And I've looked at all the ingredients in it, and I know exactly why each thing is in there. And I'm like, this is really, if I was going to create my own sleep supplement, it would look like that. And so that, in my opinion, is quite a useful supplement to use. And then the last thing, just to kind of tie it all off, I think, is that from a psychological perspective, high achievers, that sort of type A personality, like a lot of the guys that are in the circles that we are in, you're in fifth gear all day long. And if you just go from fifth gear to bed, you're going to have issues. You have to know how to like downshift, fourth gear, third gear, second, first, neutral, park. And for me personally, especially this year, more so than ever before, sort of these meditation practices that I use have helped me upshift or downshift. And so you can't just go to bed in fifth gear and feel like you're going to fall asleep. And so I'll go through, there's a couple of apps. There's an app called Better Sleep, which is one that I really like. There's another one called Reverie. I even use some of Joe Dispenza's meditations. And I find that the breathing, the visualization kind of helps me downshift into this sort of very calm parasympathetic state. So then when it's finished, I'm literally just about to fall asleep. So, and I tell you all these things because I've had issues with my sleep in the past. I'm not someone who just like would fall asleep at the drop of a hat and have perfect sleep all night. I've had to really, really learn about these things. I would actually tell you most of my results, like most people would see me like even physically and think, oh, it's just genetic. Like I don't really have a lot of things in my favor. You know what I mean? Like I don't like genetically in terms of like my natural genetic build, my natural genetic tendency for sleep, my natural genetic tendency for like focus, like these things do not come like easily to me. And so I've really had to learn about what's driving these things. And, for anyone listening and they're wondering, okay, so sleep, I get it. You threw all these tips at me. One of the things that I've noticed time and time again is not only does quality sleep improve like your mood, your energy levels, your focus through the day, it reduces cravings. Cravings diminish when your sleep improves. Fat loss gets easier. Muscle building enhances. You slow aging processes. I mean, there's so many biological things that improve as a byproduct of optimizing your sleep. I even notice little nuances. And you probably know what I'm talking about here, but when you're training and you get like a pump, I even notice that when I sleep well, that pump is improved. And so what it's telling me is that more likely than not, it's improving blood flow and oxygen transportation through the body, literally because of reductions of inflammation, that biological reset. And so from a perspective of if you want to get in amazing shape and you want to be a high producer, I think sleep has to be at the forefront. And a lot of people in the space sort of will say things like, oh, I only need to sleep 4 or 5 hours, or I don't sleep a lot. And I would tell those people that that's going to come back and get you at some point. I'm telling you now, it's going to come back and get you.
Person. I need my sleep.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are some people out there who say, oh, they don't need to sleep much. And I'm like, you say that now, but one, you're not in shape. And two, it will come back and get you, because there's only so many years that you can get away with that push without that adequate biological reset. And I would even argue that many of the people who say that are not in good shape, and they're not in good shape, and that's a byproduct of their poor sleep. So
makes total sense. No, dude, This is awesome information. So
yeah.
I know we've been going a while. I don't want to hold you any longer than maybe another 10 or 15 minutes, but I want to change topics and change gears a little bit to kind of end this off. So
let's do it, man.
As you know, this episode brought to you by my business, American Annuity Funding. And a lot of the people that we work with fall in different kind of buckets, right? And
Yep.
one of those categories would be individuals that have been involved directly in
Mhm.
some type of personal injury case.
Yep.
So, what advice do you have for the people that have suffered some type of
Mhm.
significant personal injury? Like,
Yep.
I want your kind of advice on maybe the mindset that they need.
Yep.
I know we've discussed a lot of this already,
Mhm.
but maybe you could
Yep.
elaborate specifically for them.
Yep.
The mindset that they need to get like on a good track and improve their
Mhm.
life.
Yep.
Maybe recommendations, whether it's on rehab, training, diet, just going through that type of personal trauma and injury. How can they become the best version of themselves?
Yeah, yeah, great question. And what you touched on first around the mindset, that has to come first. Because if you have the mindset that, you're a victim and this happened to you and, you're stuck with this and this is just going to be your life, you're going to keep perpetuating that outcome. And so what I would tell you is look for proof out there, first of all, that people have recovered from some of these challenges that you're going through. There's proof of anything. People have had stage 4 cancer and overcome that. So there's proof everywhere that the challenge that you're going through right now, someone has walked before you and had the courage to overcome it. So that's the first thing. The second thing I think is having a solution orientated mindset, meaning like a growth mindset where you say to yourself, okay, I have this injury, I have this challenge. What can I do? Let's say like you massively jacked up your arm or shoulder or something and you can't really do, much upper body exercises at all. You can walk, you can run, you can do so many things with your lower body and vice versa. Like if you've jacked up your lower body, there's many things you can do with your upper body. So what I would tell you is that look for things that you can do. Stop focusing on the stuff you can't do. And what can you do? Can you walk? Can you do some type of movement that is not affected by the injury that you have? That's the first thing, because you do need to remember, you do need to be active. And I would tell you things like, obviously, like physical therapy, chiropractor, acupuncture, massage. Like I would say massage and acupuncture are very useful, medical massage. Because think about this, if you've got a lot of muscle tension and a lot of scar tissue and you need to get blood flow into that area to like start accelerating that healing process. So things like sauna can be really useful. If you don't have a sauna, get a heating pack and literally every day stick that heating pack on that area that you've had the injury. You'll see it goes red. It's going red because it's pulling blood to that area. That blood's bringing oxygen. That oxygen is going to help speed up recovery. So that's obviously a very simple thing you can do. You can just sit and watch a documentary and do that. You don't have to be doing anything. Think about your nutrition as either something that is hindering cell recovery and cell turnover and cell healing, or accelerating it. So it's one or the other. And so like things like cold pressed juices, juice bars, and I tell people with your meals, ask yourself, is it foods with one ingredient? Like broccoli is just broccoli, brown rice is just brown rice. As much as you can, add in as many foods with just one ingredient. So that eliminates a lot of the processed packaged things that create some degree of inflammation in your body. So if you're sick, like if you have a virus or a cold, or you have an injury, you want to accelerate healing through like juices, foods, like even go to Google and search healthy foods high in antioxidants, healthy foods high in anti-inflammatory compounds. And you'll find all kinds of stuff. Like we talked about ginger, turmeric, those types of things. Yep. There's supplements like glutathione. You could do a nutrient IV if you wanted. Like you get these mobile IV places. You can either go to an IV clinic, you can get an NAD IV, you could get a glutathione IV. Like those things help with mitochondrial function, cell turnover, all these types of things. I would say really, really, as much as you can, prioritize sleep. Sleep will accelerate your healing process. Now, if you're in pain where it's hindering your ability to function, what I would try and tell you is try to find less potent painkillers. So like think of things like, a good quality CBD, for instance.
Let's go right into that, because I was going to ask it, but you brought it up. So
yeah. Yep.
I noticed that a lot of people too, like they gravitate towards a painkiller, and I get it. If you're in a ton of pain and
you just want something,
there's periods that
right?
you either need it or you need
Yeah,
some type of break from it. But
yeah,
what alternatives would you suggest to, like, because you
yeah.
yourself, you mentioned in the beginning of our conversation that there was
Hmm.
a lot of different types of prescriptions that you were taking for different reasons, and maybe
Yeah,
pain wasn't one of them,
yeah,
but you yourself are proof that you can get off
yeah,
self-medicating through prescription and do another tactic. So go
yeah.
into that more.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, the first one is a good quality CBD, and again, there's so many different brands out there. It's just a matter of sort of like digging in and finding one that you like and doing some research. Um, the one there's a product that I use, or I have used it before, and I've suggested to just certain people if they've been getting pain or struggling with sleep because they're in pain, is a product by Medterra called Good Night. So good Medterra Good Night. Um, it's got CBD, it's got a little bit of kava kava, it's got ashwagandha, which helps with cortisol. It's got some different things. It's got some magnesium in there. It's got a little bit of melatonin in there as well. So though that combination of things, and in my experience, for people that are in pain, can be quite useful. So I would say those two things first off. Now, when it comes to trying to reduce down the pain of the injury by accelerating the healing, there's a whole world called peptide therapy. And so obviously you'd need to speak to the right type of practitioner on this, but there's peptides out there like BPC 157 and TB 500, which are essentially amino acid chains. It's like a blueprint. And so the BPC 157, you can take it orally, but it's usually administered via a little subcutaneous injection. And it's been shown in a lot of research to really accelerate wound healing and recovery. So from that perspective, peptide therapy could be quite useful. In terms of like other painkillers, it's one of those things where I sort of I try to proceed cautiously because, like anything, there's addictive properties to anything. And so like one could argue, okay, someone who's on a lot of heavy painkillers that is really affecting the system, they might be better off using something like kratom or kava. But then those things could potentially have their challenges and their problems too. So it's one of those things where you could use those things as like a bridging tool, but you would probably want to wean yourself. Like, say, for instance, if I could give you a hypothetical and someone's like in a ton of pain, they're on a bunch of heavy painkillers, they start maybe using like kratom or kava, which is, again, something you would want to moderate, but it's probably less detrimental than the pharmaceuticals. Once they've got used to that, they could then maybe wean over to like Medterra Good Night using the peptides, and then eventually maybe just use some CBD. And so they go through a transition, basically, like a bunch of bridging tools from like incredible pain to less pain to less pain to less pain to no pain. So I do think that's really important. And the last thing is, like I said, man, just make sure that your diet's really rich with different phytonutrients, lots of colored vegetables, lots of antioxidant rich foods, lots of anti-inflammatory foods. Really keep processed sugars, processed foods to a minimum, eliminate alcohol. Make sure you're drinking some good herbal teas, move your body, get sun exposure, sauna, get some cold, get some massages. Like, there's a lot of things people can do. And what I would tell you is, don't feel like you have to do everything at once. Like, it can be overwhelming. You'd be like, oh my God, like this, I'm going to end up spending like all my money on like just therapy and stuff. Just pick a couple of things and do them consistently. But I'm telling you, like, I've seen people with all kinds of challenges, from like cancers to various injuries that were just very challenging. And I've seen them walk through and overcome these things. And like, I mean, you're a good example of that with your neck issues, that you were in so much pain and it was debilitating. And even at this point, you probably have to manage it sometimes, but it's probably dramatically better than what it was. And so, firsthand that healing and recovery is possible.
Yeah.
And so
I did
you
a
got
lot
to,
of the things that you mentioned. Like, and
yeah,
I just had it like act up this last week on me. So yeah, it's
yeah,
something that I actively deal with, but I can go 6 month
yeah,
stretches and be perfectly fine now, where I had a period of 2 years. I couldn't even work out, swing a golf club.
Yeah.
Couldn't do
Yeah.
anything at all, because if I did, it would
Yeah.
aggravate it. So yeah, chiropractor, massage.
I would
It
say acupuncture can be quite useful as well. It's
didn't
more of
work.
an Eastern therapy, but it does have its validity.
That one didn't work for me as much
Yeah.
as the chiropractic care
Mhm.
and massage
Yeah.
work did, because I had herniated discs.
Yeah.
And I mean, everybody's different, but that's
Yeah.
why you
Yeah.
you named off so much different things. Because if you try one with
Yeah.
consistency, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Go back, listen to it again, and then figure out what might work for you. Because
And
everybody's
one
different.
one last thing I wanted to mention is, you sort of talked about the herniated discs and those types of things. So think about this: like if you're dealing with something that involves like collagen or like some type of disc, you want to make sure that you're adding things in that help with collagen synthesis and collagen production. Things like vitamin C, for instance, is one. So, and glycine. So you want to search healthy foods high in glycine, or add in a glycine supplement. There's collagen producing peptides that you can take. So there's a lot of different things that you can do to help with collagen production and collagen synthesis alongside all the stuff you're doing, to make sure that all your discs and stuff are getting the substrate they need to repair. So just think about it in terms of, what are the things that your body needs to regenerate certain tissue, and what foods or supplements create those things. Add those into your diet. And I promise you, if you do it, you got to do it consistently though. It's going to be the one thing that you do like, once a month. If you brush your teeth once a month, you're still going to eat cavities. It's got to be a daily practice, right? So this type of stuff, when you make it a daily practice, man, it can be life-changing. I'm an example of that with the psychological stuff with the medications. You make these things a daily practice. Half the things you thought were a true story about yourself were just a narrative that you were told, and you believed it at the time, and you can reinvent that and rewrite that story.
So this has been phenomenal, first off. So thank you for joining me and going down this rabbit hole of everything: mindset, fitness, diet, nutrition, so on and so forth. We'll leave links to everything in the YouTube video. So
sounds good.
Where can everybody find you? And then I saw here that you have your new Superhuman think tank coming up.
Yeah.
What exactly is that, and how could somebody get involved if they want to?
Yeah. So if you just, first of all, if you just find me on Facebook, Fraser Bayley, or Instagram at Fraser Bayley. We have some business pages, but I focus more on my personal brand stuff right now. And the Superhuman think tank, I'm opening it up probably this week. And so if you just search Superhuman think tank, or you message me on Facebook, I can send you the link for that. And that's just going to be everything that I teach, is everything I talk about. I'm going to add more value in there, because obviously with algorithms and what I post on social media, I don't want to post like too much stuff out there, because a lot of people may not be interested in all the different things. But for anyone who's interested in, all the stuff we've talked about, and optimizing and just tapping into that Superhuman 2.0 version of yourself, that's going to be the place where I'm going to share a lot of the nuggets. So that's where you'd find me.
Awesome, man. Well, appreciate you. You have any other last words, or?
That's it, man. This was an absolute pleasure. And, I hope that your audience gets a bunch of value out of this, and I hope that you got some value out of it as well, buddy.
I definitely did. So I appreciate it.